Congress meeting. We do apologize for the delay and hiccups here and there, but we appreciate commitment and the resilience even when things seem to be not happening. We really thank you so much. We sincerely apologize, and right now we didn't want to take much of the time. I just want to really say thank you for your commitment and your resilience, even when things seem to be not working. So right now, we have already lost about 20 minutes or so. And in the few remaining minutes of the Students' Congress, allow me again remind you that we've been trying to look at data management and data analysis. And we had a session last week where we were looking at few concepts in data analysis. And this morning, we want to continue with the same. So allow me invite my brother, Ben, to take us through a practical part, and then we'll be able to follow through with him. So Ben, I want to hand over this mic to you right now to take us through in these remaining minutes of our Students' Congress.
Okay, good morning, friends. Again, apologies for the hiccups this morning. I didn't intend to do that, so the remaining for now also, if we don't finish, it doesn't really put us anywhere. So just try to share something here. Okay, I'm going to take the lazy option here for the illustration about the concepts we did. The video we had was using SPSS, but I'm going to use stata. Anyone who has this, you can do this together, but the outputs is the most important thing, not the software. So whatever you want to do. So I'm going to take a lazy option here. I don't have a data set that I could refer to, but just use what the system has. If you have stata on your machine, stata comes with some sample data sets that you can play around with for the same issues. So, Joseph, I don't know if everyone can see my screen.
Yes, at least I can confirm I can see very well.
Okay. So you can just system use with the word directory or dir and to just access those data sets which stata comes with. So all these are just sample data sets which you can download or pick and then use them for your illustration, whatever it is. So some of the data is cross-sectional, some of it is time series. So each of these depending on what you want to do. And I'm going to pick one here. System use. I'm going to be picking this particular one. It's about life expectancy. Type it here or just copy and paste it here. Should be a space. Then you say enter. So on the right here where my cursor is, these are where the variables are, what they mean for this particular case, and you can go ahead and use them. So I have country, region, population, life expectancy. This is GDP per capita, access to safe water. But you can also just describe or write the word describe here to know more about this data set you have chosen to use, the details about it. And if you do that, then I'm having 68 observations. I'm having 6 variables, which means region, country, and these are the variables. In region, I have country. Those are not necessarily variables, but is measured in this. So I have population growth, which means average annual population growth, life expectancy at birth. The ones with the stars here, you can actually just click on it to see the detail of that variable, which is the population growth, average annual growth rate for that period. The second variable I'm seeing here is life expectancy at birth, which is the number of years for that particular, in that particular country, and GNP per capita for that particular period, and also safe water here means access to safe water, percentage of the population which has access to safe water in that country. And they're doing this for period 1992, 96. So you can, of course, also physically come here and click editor to see the data. I don't know if you can see this window. Joseph, can you see that window?
We are seeing it.
The one with a kind of spreadsheet.
Yes.
Okay, so thanks. So these are the variables we are looking at. The region where this country comes from, they just sampled some countries. Population growth, I think this is a percentage measured for each of the countries. Life expectancy, this is a number of years somebody is expected to live as from birth. GNP is the GNP per capita, which is the number of this population. And then for each country, and then safe water, we talked about the percentage of the population which has access to safe water. You can notice that some countries don't have some values. So again, these are always data issues that you have to mention. So the 68, the 68 countries we are seeing here. So you can tell this has no time dimension. It is cross-sectional data set in this case, which you're going to work around with. And so if we had years or year here or months or weeks, then this would turn into a time series kind of analysis. So this is equivalent to the cross-sectional or surveys that we do in the 68 countries. The region is the region where this country is being classified into for these cross-sectionals. I see we have, I think, 3 regions, but we can close this and go back. If I want to see the meaning of all these, I can tabulate a variable. For instance, how many regions are we talking about? You just click on it and then it gives you those details. So I have 3 regions out of the 68 countries. 44 are in this region, 14 are in North America, and then 10 are in South America, and so on and so forth. So the first step is to just understand again which data or variables you are dealing with in these contexts, so that you can go ahead and use this variable. So quantitative data analysis, after even any data analysis, after knowing the meaning of the data you are working with, the next step is to at least get the descriptives, or we call them summary statistics, to just know what you're really working around here with. And even the same approach or things, you can do them in SPSS or any other software that we may use. This is not only restrictive to this status. So you can just say summarize. I'll just shortcut for is SUM. If I want to get summary statistics, now you don't want to summarize the region. I don't know what you want to do with the region by summaries. These are quantitative values. I'll also skip country and just look at the quantitative variables here. So I'm just selecting them. If you see wherever I click, they come down here. And then if you say enter, then it starts playing for you. We get these details. You can also add other details if you want them. But at least you want to know this is the variable, and then these are the summary statistics you want to look at. So population, I have 68 observations, population growth, which means for the 68 countries, on average, the population growth is 0.97% with its standard deviation. The minimum value I have is 0.05 in this data set per percent, and the maximum, which means the highest population growth registered in the sample, is 3%. We don't know which country. You can look up and find which country that is. For life expectancy, we have 68 observations, which means each country at least has a figure or value. The average or the mean is about 72 years for this sample. The minimum or the lowest life expectancy in this sample is 54, and the maximum is 79 years in this sample we are looking at. And GNP per capita, we have 63 observations, meaning there are 5 countries that are missing. Out of the 68, have 63 countries that are only having values for this variable. We don't know if they are missing at random or data was not available, but those are the things we always check for. And that's the reason why you always want to start with the summary statistics. So on average, you're talking of 8,067 GNP per capita. The lowest is 370. I don't know which country this is, but you can sort and check. And then the maximum is about 39,908 or 40,000 country according to this registered. Then the other variable finally is safe water, access to safe water. We are seeing 40 observations, meaning almost 28 countries have missing values from this sample. And the average is 76% of the population is having access to safe water. And the lowest is 28 registered, and the maximum is some 100%, meaning there is a country or there are countries with 100% access to safe water in this particular sample. Okay, and if there is any question, please go ahead and raise it, or that we move together. I don't want to be talking. So now back to our video last week. I think it was about regression analysis, or which the video we watched, and we said we could also find on small data set and try to do it, which I'm doing here, and then we move ahead to interpret or understand what those numbers mean. So in analysis, sometimes also before we even go to regression analysis, we want to run some correlations, of course, which usually comes from your conceptual framework anyway. But to just check the relationship among the variables, again, I don't want to do correlations of region and country, because these are really not quantitative values per se, although they can be used either as categorical variables. So you can also run correlation among your variables to just see, the association, or in terms of direction, what if there is. But of course, statistically, this will always show up. It is you who should know which variables to correlate. So, and the pairwise meaning W is pairwise correlation. So these are the coefficients. Of course, the ones you are correlating the variable in itself. So that's why it is 1. So we're interested in the values below the ones. Remember that on the upper side, they are the same values, but this one is just showing this one. So correlation between population and life expectancy is negative here. I should have added to see if it's significant or not, but the most important is the sign, meaning an increase in population growth as a negative correlation is likely to lower life expectancy in a country for this particular sample. This one is also showing a negative relationship. Okay, no, the most important is life expectancy and the other variables. So with GDP and life expectancy, it is positive. I think this is close was expected. And then safe water and life expectancy is positive, meaning increase in access to safe water is expected to lead to increase in life expectancy. And that's what I can see. So this value and this value, and then this one, because you're talking about life expectancy here as your dependent variable. I should have started with it when I was choosing my variables here, but you always know which ones anyway that you are dealing with. So I'll go ahead and try to also perform those the regression, I think, which we did last time. So we can write the full word or just REG for regression, and usually you start with the dependent variable or your criterion variable. So I'll start by listing life expectancy because it is the dependent variable in this case. And then you can add all the variables or the other independent variables in your estimation according to your framework. So I'll start with the population. I'm adding GDP, and then I'm adding safe water or access to safe water. So in essence, this is the relationship, or this is from your conceptual framework, you are here saying life expectancy is dependent or predicted by population growth rate, GN, gross national product, or GNP per capita, and then access to safe water. And if you say enter, so this is your output. And I think we had this kind of output from the other video which they were talking about. So it's just the interface. The same result can be obtained in SPSS. You realize that SPSS brings you this whole result in portions. It first gives you this F or R squared, then SPSS will give you ANOVA, and then another table will come down below that for the coefficients and your results. But it is really the same issue. The software is not the issue here. It is the numbers. Which numbers do you currently put into your manuscript or write-up? Which numbers do you talk about? And most importantly, what do they mean in your analysis? So, right, going by the explanations we have saw in the video last week, this whole table here that I'm highlighting, in essence, is actually your conceptual framework. the results of your conceptual framework that we are referring, that you are going to be talking about here, that you have specified something that you have conceptualized here, that your independent variable, and then these are the independent variables, and then these are the results. And then, of course, the other numbers up here, which specify or tell us what you're looking at. So I'll start with, to go through each of these and what they mean. I'll start with the number of observations. When we went up on the summary statistics, we saw number of observations varying here. So we have 68 countries, but here what we are looking at in the observation is dropping to 37. So in essence, this is now your overall sample that has been analyzed. When we did, there are some variables which had missing values. So this software will try to drop those observations with missing data. That's why the question of missing data in analysis, especially quantitative analysis, has to really be explained very well. Why is the variable missing? Because some of the assumptions are likely to be dropped by your software, like in this case here, because each row which had the missing values, now that country has been dropped in your final analysis. So you must always take care of that when it happens. But anyway, if this is a number of observations, so this corresponds to your sample size. In this case, it is the number of countries that have finally been included in the sample and from the sample for analysis here. The F statistic, if you remember, it is this value, 26.97. The F value shows the significance of your overall estimation, that the how jointly significant your independent variables, your independent variables explain or predict the dependent variable. And its probability value, this is at 0.05% or 95% confidence. The closer the value is to 0, the significant the model is. So in this case, a higher F value and a lower probability implies what we have conceptualized here is significant. It doesn't necessarily mean it is true, but your conceptual framework from the variables you have specified is significant. Significant meaning you can go ahead and make statistical inferences from your model. Now, we should not confuse significance with the some people misplace to use it that in my model is true. Doesn't mean what you have specified is true, but rather it is statistically reliable for you to make inferences from. Remember, this is your conceptual framework where we are picking this or model where we are picking this estimation from. The R squared is the proportion of the variation in the dependent variable jointly explained by all your independent variables, meaning about 71% of the variation in life expectancy is jointly explained by population growth, by GNP, per capita, and safe water jointly. So the variation in the the dependent variable by all your dependent variables, which is about 7.71%. As I mentioned last week, adjusted R and R are doing the same job. The adjusted R here is that it specifies, and why we dwell on it, specifies the variation we are going to be attaining as more independent variables are added in your estimation. So we only have 3 here. If you go ahead and bring in another independent variable, this is the penalty you receive for increasing, you are changing your specification. In other words, somebody may say, oh, your estimation is missing another variable which is important. You collect the data and you add it. As you do that, we are changing the specification from the area you have been estimating. So that's why it is the penalty for additional independent variables you add in your estimation. And that's why this value, like I mentioned last week, can even go and become negative as you keep increasing number of independent variables in your estimation. So the root mean square, you can call it the standard error of your whole model associated with your specification. The table on the left here is what we know as the analysis of variance on the ANOVA table. It is having two things, the model, which you have specified, and then the residual. The residual, is variation in the dependent variable outside the model. Those things that could influence your dependent variable, which is life expectancy, but have not been added or specified in your conceptual framework. So the model is the explained sum of squares. Remember, with the regression, you are minimizing the residuals, meaning you are telling us that to the best of your knowledge, what you are specifying is the true a specification or explanation of life expectancy in this case. So we aim at minimizing residuals while maximizing the model here, or the model here is representing the independent variables which you have added. So in essence, this number, the model, the 682 should be almost the same as the total. When you sum this and this gives you this total. We are minimizing this residual. You are telling us that you have included all the independent variables that explain life expectancy into your best knowledge, which is your conceptual framework. And that's what the model here is specifying. And for this particular case, when you're talking about R squared, the 71%, if you divided the 682 over 960, you should get this 0.71, which is the joint variation in the dependent variable flying by all the independent variables in your estimation. That's where the 0.71 comes from. You divide your model over the total, gives you that. Degrees of freedom, this is in estimation, we call them restrictions in the estimation, usually determined by K minus 1. K is the number of parameters or coefficients in your model, but it is less than 1. Restrictions means all your independent variables, including the constant. That's the meaning of K or restriction. So restriction is K minus 1 for the model, which means I have K 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 3 independent variables plus a constant, which is 4, but minus 1, which is usually the constant. That's why it is 3. And then the balance is N minus K. I had 30. For the observation is here, we had the 37, which is the total observations, minus K, which is the 4. The restriction is 4, and that's where we get the 33. And so this plus this is the 36 you're having here. Then the mean sum of squares, you just divide 682 by 3. It should give you this 227. And the 278 by 33, it should give you this 8.4. Okay, and then finally for the coefficients or your variables. So here we have life expectancy, which is the dependent variable. We have population growth, which is and GNP per capita and safe water. So the interpretation here really is an increase in population growth by 1% is associated with a 0.76 reduction in life expectancy. Reduction because it is minus, 0.76 to the magnitude. Okay, that's what it would mean here. The standard error, this is the distance between of your coefficient from its mean. The t value, like I said, is the number of standard errors, which is also used to test significance. Your coefficient is from 0, which means we get minus 0.76 divided by 0.060 should give you this. The value is less than 2 or 1.96. The p-value is above 0.5%, and that's why it is not significant. So we can say of the significant values going from these ones, we only have safe water and constant. These are not significant, but in interpretation, that's what would mean. For GDP, an increase in GDP by 1 unit is associated with this increase in life expectancy, but again, it is not significant if you look at the p-value, which moves by that portion. And safe water, I think this is significant. An increase in safe water by this 1% is associated with 0.18 increase in life expectancy for that particular sample. T-value is 4.82 and p-value of close to 0, which is that. And the constant, as we say, is that variation in life expectancy when these three variables up are all equal to 0. In other words, it is the life expectancy. It is 57 years of life expectancy when population growth, GNP, safe water, all are carrying on 0 values or not changing. And so that is what we mentioned. I think those are the numbers we watched last week in the video. There are variables which you always deal with. If I'm to bring this back, some variables are not quantitative in nature, or they are categorical variables. No, like age, like gender. In this case, we have region. Statistical or quantitative, they don't have any numerical meaning, but they can be used to also look at. For instance, you want to analyze this by region to see which region has a higher life expectancy compared to the other. So because it is a categorical variable, in statistics, you'll hear it commonly used as a dummy variable. Its numerical meaning, it does not make sense, but it also gives meaning to, in terms of if you want to compare groups or across performance of some things across groups. So if I recall this and add region, for instance, I want to see this life expectancy performance by region. If I replace my variable, just add I meaning indicator variables, indicator variable if I have, so region. If I added the region in my regression, so you can still do the same regression, same numbers, same issues we have talked about here, but I just wanted to see by region, what does it mean? Remember, I had 3 regions, but if I'm to tap here region again, when you are analyzing by region, I have 3 regions: Europe and Central Asia, North America and South America. But in analysis, because it is a categorical variable, you are comparing between among groups. So you must have a reference group that you refer to. If it was gender, male and female as the 2 categories, you now have 1 in the result should be 1 because the other one is used as a reference, depending on which one you choose to make. So you'd have that kind of comparison. But what I just wanted to mention here is, if we did the same analysis by region, 0.06 and 1.1, we have North America and South America in reference to Europe and Central Asia. Now, the values here do not make any sense. You cannot say an increase in North America by one region, by 1 point leads to increase in life expectancy by this. No, doesn't mean that is not the meaning here. Rather, it is the sign which we take here. So the interpretation of, for instance, 0.06 would say relative or comparable to Europe and Central Asia, people in North America are relatively have a higher because it is positive. If it was negative, it would be less, are more likely or have a higher life expectancy compared to life expectancy in Europe and Central region. If I'm looking about South America, because it is a categorical variable, and the value here is positive, I would also say relative to Europe and Central Asia, life expectancy in South America is higher, because I'm comparing now South America and Europe or Central Asia. And that's what those numbers would mean. And of course, what would make you also, but they are not significant in this case because of their p-value. So it's not something you can, from this sample, make generalization on. I just brought them here so that the people know. Sometimes we have categories of variables, categorical variables in our data, marital status, religion, whatever you want to do. So in terms of analysis, it also adds flair if you are comparing groups for that. Joseph, I think that's what I can say. And thank you very much. No. Anybody else there?
Yes, Bernard.
Yes. How are you, sir?
I'm
I
fine.
can't get hold of Joseph, I guess.
I don't know, he has disappeared. Maybe network.
I think so. Okay. Otherwise, I think Professor Michael Koche, I think friends, that's what we had. If there are any questions, we can do this. I see Dr. Ahmed. Oh, Joseph, okay.
Yes, I'm back. Thank you. Thank you very much. I had a bit of network challenge here, but I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Bernard. And again, I want to say that we cannot learn all that it is that we need in one day, in 1 minute, but trusting that we will have a series of this. And again, if you want more help in the same, also feel free at your own time to get in touch with Bernard and any other person in the team, and you could have some more time. Today we've had a bit of challenges and we started late, and we sincerely apologize, and we hope that next time we'll do better. Right now, I want to welcome Professor Michael Koche, who is going to take us through the next level. Professor Michael, I hope you are on call. Okay, I can see. Okay, Prof, can I kindly hand over to you?
Okay, thank you so much, Joseph and Bernard. Thank you so much for the wonderful session. I think this morning we have been blessed to have Bernard take us through stata, and I think it was really exciting for me. This morning, I want to begin by welcoming all of us for this session. And before we move forward, I first want to begin by acknowledging most of the senior colleagues and all of us for having been able to log in this morning. Of course, this platform has continuously continued bringing different scholars across the world to meet every Sunday and discuss topical issues of interest which drive scholarship. And that's why I must really appreciate Professor Joseph Ntai. Professor Joseph Ntai, we appreciate you because for almost 2 years now, we're able to meet every Sunday, discuss topical issues which help us to grow intellectually. And this morning we shall be having one of our guests, which I think I will invite Professor Joseph Ntai to introduce at the opportune time. But let me take this time to acknowledge our student leaders, that is Bosco Merit, Bernard Bokala, we have Joseph Elasu, and many others. Allow me also to appreciate the senior colleagues, Dr. Ahmed Walgembe. Doctor, welcome, and we appreciate you for coordinating this, the Socrates Society. Dr. Gideon Nkuruzinza, we appreciate you. Professor James Kagari, you are welcome. Like I said, that I will leave Professor Joseph to be the one to welcome our host and then introduce him extensively and then take us through the session. Professor Joseph, I don't know whether you're on.
Thank you very
Yes.
much,
Yes.
Professor. Thank you very much, Professor Okoche. I hope you can hear me there.
Yes, Prof. Yes, Prof.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to welcome you to our today's session, and I want to thank Mr. Elasu and Mr. Wabukara for the great job that they've done in moderating the session that we had from 3 to 4. We are really very sorry for the technical hiccup, and we didn't have any hand in it. We do not know exactly what went wrong, but I think we'll try to investigate and find a way of dealing with that. This morning, as you saw, our topic is an interesting one, really looking at the PhD career outside the academia. And we know very well that really higher education ranks well when one has a PhD serving in a university setting or probably a research center. And we know very well that the reality out there might be a little bit different, especially not every individual who gets a PhD will join higher education. So really understanding the nature and quality of careers for a PhD is a pressing issue. And that's why it is really important for us to understand this animal called a PhD and the post-PhD careers and of course, the perceptions that people have about the value of a PhD, especially in the academic setting and non-academic setting. So this morning, we've got one of the renowned professors and really high-ranking professors in academics, who has also had an opportunity to work outside the academics, and that is Professor Muhammad Mpeza Mihigo, who is a Vice Chancellor, Kampala International University. So what I'll do is to give you a brief bio about him. He has a Bachelor of Science in Forestry and Master of Science in Agriculture, Makerere University. He has a PhD, University of Reading, and he has done a lot in the area of horticulture and landscape management. And he's a highly skilled, trained, and experienced in university and higher education management. He's really very good in the area of leadership, area of governance, quality assurance and management, and really plus a number of other things. Previously, he was Dean of the Faculty of Science and Vice Rector of Finance and Administration, Vice Rector Academic Affairs in Islamic University in Uganda. That was between 2005 and 2015. He's a Vice Chancellor of Kampala International University since 2015 to date. And he has won lots of awards in global education excellency. He has that Global Education Excellence Award winner, Leadership Excellency, Uganda National Council for Higher Education Award for dedicated service. He also has, is the award winner, Ecosystem Network Systems and the Association of Commonwealth Universities Awards. All of those go to him, and he's done a lot. He's been a president, implementation network of the Virus Outbreak Data Network, Africa and Asia, and treasurer and member of the executive committee, Uganda Vice Chancellor's Forum, and he's been a board member, still a board member and representative of universities, Uganda National Examination Board, and he has supervised several postgraduate students, so he understands the terrain very well, especially when we talk about postgraduate, and he has published journal articles, a number of them, books, and of course, conference papers and chapters. So he's been a keynote speaker at several national and international conferences, symposiums, workshops, and really he's, as you see him, he's responsible for significant institutional transformation. So he's done lots of things while at Kampala International University. I've had an opportunity of interacting with him and crossing our path in a number of areas. And this morning we are privileged to have Professor Muhammad Mpeza Mihigo. So ladies and gentlemen, join me as we welcome him to speak to us. Over to you, Mpeza Mihigo.
Thank you so much, Professor Antai. It's really an honor to meet you at 4 a.m. This is, for East Africans, this is interesting. I also want to thank the chair of this session. Thank you so much for introducing the session. And one particular gentleman, Ahmad Walugembe. So I don't know whether I'm audible enough from my side, whether you can hear me.
You are, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, this is a great honor. I know there are quite a number of people here, more than 55 people attending. I hope I'll add some value. There's nothing much new that you are going to hear from me, but it's the repackaging, and I'm sure maybe some of the people on board. I think there is even a colleague, many colleagues I can see here, and I want to thank them for being very super active. So ladies and gentlemen, scholars out there globally, I would like to ask the admin whether I could actually share my my screen.
You can share, you have the rights.
Okay. Let me just check here. Let me see. I think I'm having a little challenge, but it should be okay. It's just showing a blank screen. I don't know whether I should do. Just a second.
If you can open it from the desktop and then share, it will be quite easier.
Yeah, I've tried to. I really apologize. Well, I think what I could do maybe. Okay, so maybe as I get this sorted, I can start. Maybe I can send this to one of the people who can. Maybe I'll share this document later, and I apologize. Okay, let me just start the. I think it is picking up, taking long. These are some of the hassles of the technology. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I do apologize that my computer is taking long to open the screen. I was asked to speak about the relevance of a PhD beyond the academia. And basically, what I understood by this is the fact that a PhD needs to be looked at from the historic perspective. From the research that has been conducted, and I'm sure most of you probably know, Doctor of Philosophy really is derived from the Latin word philosophia doctor, which has actually grown from history and from the medieval times. You will find that in most of the universities in Europe, the study was organized. The PhD, what you call a PhD, did not exist. It was known as just doctoral in terms of canon law, civil law. Some universities or education institutions organize it around the faculties of theology, medicine, and later on, the title doctor was actually merely a formality bestowed on any teacher, anybody who actually conducted studies or who taught. It would have been in arts, it would have been in theology. And the doctorates in the higher faculties were quite different. As time passed by, many of the scholars actually did not take that as a degree or a qualification beyond the normal. It was later on that the PhDs, in the beginning, what they call the Doctor of Philosophy, from the Latin roots, as I have mentioned, actually focused on basically advanced scholarship, not necessarily original research. And I think this is the most important point for us this morning. What's the difference between doing a PhD to advanced scholarship and a PhD that focuses on producing original research? And this is really the turning point as the PhD terminology and practices grew and expanded from Europe to the whole world. Now, the PhD journey is also known to have started as early as 1150. And this is something that is quite fascinating. Keith Alan Noble in 1994 published the journey, the historic medieval PhD development in Paris around 1150. Later on, around 1652, the Germans also developed a PhD as something to have as a terminal credential around the 17th century, that's 1652 to be very specific. So we see as far back as 1150 in France, and then around 1652 in Germany. This actually amazing thing happened, and growth of the PhD, the terminology doctorate of philosophy, having its roots from basically religious institutions, and later on went into medicine, law, and other disciplines. Unfortunately, in Germany, this high-level qualification as a terminal credential for teachers in the 17th century was also tagged in terms of politics. In fact, what happened to be supported, to be funded for a PhD in Germany in those years, in the 17th century, this was tagged on your political inclination. And it's known, it's also read in literature that some of the professors, if you wish, who were pursuing PhDs actually were cut off the moment the state intelligence discovered that one was not in favor of the existing political lines. You know, of course, the history of Germany, well, between the East and the West, you know, the big powers scrambled for that country. And so those who were in power could only allow the favorables to pursue PhDs. So this is something that we needed to understand, that although it meant that this was a terminal credential for teachers, but it was also not an obvious thing, even if you had some brilliant scholars who wanted or would have wished to pursue their PhD journey. As we continue, what happened, of course, the German East and German West, and definitely German West attracted quite a number of students, foreign students, majorly from the United States of America. And we see that around 1861, Yale University started actually granting PhD degrees to younger students who, on condition, must have obtained a bachelor's degree and also completed a prescribed course of graduate study, but most importantly, to have successfully defended a thesis or dissertation containing, and I want our listeners to underline the word original research in science or in humanities. So we see Yale coming now, and this is really like people came to Germany to study under different exchange programs as early as that. And Yale, we know, is one of the top universities in the world. and it is recorded that is one of the among the first American universities that introduced PhD studies. On those conditions, you should have attained a bachelor's, then you did a graduate study, and you must have successfully defended a dissertation or thesis, but you should have also proved that your work is actually original. Now, I came across a report of the OECD, which probably you know, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and this is made up of more than 38 countries. The OECD has got statistics that show with time how many adults actually attain or hold PhDs. You know, some countries have up to 1.1 to up to around 3%. Now, these statistics are a bit, I can say, not questionable, but have actually been outlived, because the statistics included people who were actually in some countries, as the PhD nomenclature grew and the terminology and the status, some people who held masters were also actually called doctors in some situations, and also some bachelor holders like medicine, doctor of medicine, doctor of pharmacy. With time, the statistics actually got sort of messed up in terms of looking at a doctoral degree rather than just a doctor of philosophy degree. So the OECD, with the interest and then the value that is known of the major contribution of a PhD, you know, a higher degree, focused resources, and also kept track of this kind of development of careers with PhDs. Now, in Europe, generally, there were similar awards spread between the 19th and early 20th centuries. In fact, you'll be surprised, up to today, some universities name their PhDs as diplomas. I'm sure, and I like really the Socratic Association or Society, because I think Socrates was a great thinker, and some very, very traditional institutions have actually maintained naming of PhDs as diplomas. In our context, the Ugandan context, for example, or East African region, it is also, it would be very surprising. I'm sure even National Council for Higher Education, I think for which Professor Ntai has contributed immensely as a reviewer, as an assessor, as an expert, and maybe a few of the colleagues who are listening in. A diploma, if you said, I hold a diploma, which is the equivalent of a PhD, I'm sure you know what would happen to you. You'd be in deep trouble. So these nomenclatures have actually, some have quickly adapted to the new naming of the PhDs, while in others, for example, in Russia, a PhD was known as the Doctor Nauk degree, which is roughly the equivalent of a PhD, and slowly it replaced what they used to call the specialist diploma, which also was the equivalent of a Master's of Arts as the highest academic degree. By the way, to date, especially from Tanzanian perspective, there are people who studied in Russia. I think even here in Uganda, we do have some. To date, there's still serious questions about people who studied in the former Soviet Union, USSR. And the whole issue is about the nomenclature, the hierarchy in the PhD, the composition of what is covered, and I'll be talking about it just in a minute. And the issues of qualifications equivalences has come up basically to try and do the harmonization. So in Italy, for example, they used to have what they call the laureate as the highest academic degree. as early as 1927. And so I'm sure some of you probably have heard about the Bologna process, you know, that harmonized higher education, the tunings process, and others that have tried to equate qualifications. And PhD is one of those qualifications that is quite interesting because it's now a global requirement, incidentally. It has been sort of mainstreamed in academia, but I think we are looking at beyond academia, what's its relevance. So I thought I'd give you this brief journey about the PhD. Now in African context, I think this is the assignment I'll give you to find out which was the first PhD country, which country actually produced the first PhD in Africa. Dr. Walugembe, I think this is your assignment, sir. You gave me an assignment to research about this topic. I'll also ask you to find out, and maybe you'll be able to give us some insights. But I know that we are always late entrants, even in terms of the numbers. And again, not to say what is already known, that the World Bank has already stated that there are some statistics that are great indicators for the development, socio-economic development of a country. One of them is the enrollment, you know, the percentage of the population that is enrolled, you know, in high school, in university, and then also in terms of PhD production. This we know from the statistics. And again, you can read more and find out what happens. So we see the journey, and each of the countries had its own reasons for adopting and for the delayed adoption of a standard naming of the PhDs, and also the structure and how it was taught and attained. So what we already know, ladies and gentlemen, we know that PhDs are awarded, you know, for different programs across the whole breadth of academic fields. And a PhD is an earned research degree. This is, I think, core. At the moment, in the Ugandan context, as far as I know, the National Council for Higher Education has benchmarks for PhD programs. They call it postgraduate, including the postgraduate diplomas, the masters, and the PhDs, but our focus this morning is on the PhDs. Those studying different tracks of PhDs at least must produce original research. And I don't know what original means, because this is really the key, the fundamental difference between your own work and somebody else's work. And the reason why you should be awarded the PhD, can you justify the originality of your research? Number two, your contribution must expand expand the boundaries of knowledge. You see that you can have inbreeding production of knowledge, where people just cycle the information they have. They also paraphrase it excellently. Not only do they do that, but they also snatch the ownership. I know you understand the issues of academic dishonesty. And so a PhD is expected to expand. So if we know, for example, there's some kind of research, let's say in financial, now that we are going into digital currencies, or we are already in digital currencies, and you want to undertake a PhD, by definition, you should bring on board something new. And secondly, you should contribute. In other words, if we are trying to understand the meaning of expansion, it means what was will not be the same after your completion of the PhD. Then, number three, you must defend the work before a panel. So I'm trying to take you through this journey so that we see whether really people go beyond academia, or even they do not suit the academia. I mean, I just want to be very provocative. So you have to defend your thesis or dissertation before a panel of other experts in the field. And this is where sometimes there's unfairness in terms of defense. I mean, I've attended so many viva voces. I have attended, I've done some external examining. I've done quite a number of things in that aspect. But sometimes you are actually, you are highly impressed by the panels of experts that actually challenge a PhD candidate, which is a good one. But in some instances, you also wonder whether it's not something else that they are looking for. So the defense of your PhD, of anybody's PhD, must align properly with the two boundaries I've talked about. It has to be original, but also secondly, you have to expand the boundaries of knowledge, and the people who endorse that expansion and prove and check whether indeed you own that process are these experts in your field, and who actually state and say, this is a confirmation that you deserve to have this title, doctor, against your name. Now, let's ask this question. Why pursue a PhD in the first place? I know this session should have been better off if it is interactive, but we don't have enough time. And I've already used about 30 minutes or slightly less. The first thing is, I mean, some people undertake a PhD because they want to climb the academic ladder and access related privileges. I have met colleagues in the university systems within the East African region, by the way, even abroad in Europe, and you ask them, why did you take a PhD? You know, the salary paid to PhD holders is much higher. So you can imagine somebody's PhD was driven for purposes of accessing privileges. In some situations, there is mandatory push. There's a mandatory push. And in fact, if you don't comply in some institutions, you are dropped off. I'm sure you know. There has to be a very clear program and schedule by an individual staff to show that they are on a career path to attain a PhD. Just like we normally push teaching assistants or tutorial assistants or assistant lecturers or lecturers, you know, to go to the next level. And if you do not do that, of course, there's going to be stagnation in terms of staff capacity. Then the second reason, you may wish to know that some people pursue a PhD for prestigious reasons. You know, some people really want to, and by the way, we should differentiate this between the academic PhD and the honorary doctorate. I'm sure that can be for another time. But there are people also who pursue academic PhDs really for prestigious reasons. And once they attain it, that's all they want. I mean, you can go wherever you want to go. They will not even take on an appointment. It's enough for them. They have arrived, if you wish to use that. Then there are people who actually decide to undertake a PhD path because they are unemployed and they have nothing else to do at that particular moment. So you hear somebody saying, I don't know whether the participants in this meeting actually understand Luganda. They say, you know, attending nature kola, you know, like passing time, you know, it's like saying, I haven't anything else to do, but in the meantime, let me just preoccupy myself. Now, I want you to appreciate by the end of this particular discussion I'm giving, for you to understand that if you have 10 PhDs out there, you may find they fall under the different categories. They had different reasons why they pursued their PhDs. And so somebody who is doing a PhD for purposes of passing time, he cannot have the same interest and motivation beyond a PhD as somebody who did it for prestigious reasons, or somebody who was actually pushed because of survival. You know, somebody, I mean, says, if I don't do a PhD, I'll lose a job and I have kids to look after. You know, I have to earn more money and address my financial needs. Number 4, and this is, I think, the bit that is more interesting. There are people who do PhDs and have a target future research and innovation agenda, cutting edge research. And I think these are the highly motivated. There is more funding there. There are issues that, you know, drive this push. I mean, universities here in Uganda, recently I attended the National Council for Higher Education conference, and we are focused on mainly ODEL. And Professor Mukada Sibuyinza, who heads the graduate school at Makerere University, really gave some very interesting data on PhD production at Makerere University. And I think, you know, the target was to deliver around 400 annually. Or something like that along the way. They've done a lot with funding from agencies in different countries that have contributed. And so the target future research and innovation, I'll tell you, for example, KIU, also Kampala International University, we have now at the moment about 29 accredited PhD programs. And if you ask me as the Vice Chancellor, I will tell you that, for example, we got our PhDs in biomedical sciences approved, and we developed the curriculum documents. There was accreditation, you know, everything was done properly. And in 2019 alone, I had 5 biomedical sciences PhD. Now, if you ask me why would you go into, I mean, a PhD is very expensive. First of all, the senior staff in the Ugandan context, you know that we have a huge shortage. And then my own staff for the biomedical sciences, I'm very ambitious. I have the largest, KIU has got the largest school of biomedical sciences. By biomedical sciences, I mean departments of anatomy, physiology, microbiology, pharmacology, biochemistry. And these are the foundation departments or programs for medicine and for all the other health sciences. Even nursing actually covers those areas. Even pharmacy does the same. Allied health sciences. So my target is to produce more PhDs that can actually support the master's programs, and therefore I have a vibrant staff development program. But beyond producing extra manpower or human resource, I have to focus on developing the research and innovation capacity of the university. So for me, even when I offer staff development opportunities, I know there are 2 aspects. First of all, I want to increase the numbers. Once I have enough, I will also share with the other medical schools and other institutions in Uganda and within the region. But most importantly, I have to do an investment in cutting edge laboratory infrastructure so that the PhDs, first of all, that are produced are good and very competitive and are really internationally accredited. So that if a colleague from Australia comes for a postdoctoral program, that is cutting edge. Therefore, I can house them, they can feel comfortable, but most importantly, they can attain their research and innovation aspirations. So there are people who do the PhD for that, and really you have to define the focus of that. So the target future research and innovation is a major reason for anybody to undertake a PhD. Now, there is the last but not least, and you can add on this list, ladies and gentlemen, where somebody says, anyway, funding is available. You know, like at Makerere, I think, and with all due respect, there are some people who are pushed into the PhD because there's money. So do those people really have Did they undertake the PhDs by accident? Or, I mean, it's like, there's a free lift here. Do you want to go and attend a function? And I really respect everybody who does the PhD where there is facilitation. Was it designed by design? And the key issue here, where funding is available, and it's in plenty, and people, we even have a shortage of candidates. In some institutions, you'll be shocked that there would be money that targets particular PhD development, but you do not have candidates. And even somebody tells you, sorry, I have a lot of work. I can't even study abroad. While I was at IUIU, Islamic University in Uganda, we faced a very similar challenge. I had colleagues for whom we had identified scholarships for postgraduate studies in Turkey. And some universities require that you undertake their language first 9 months, and then you are able to pursue academics. And several of them up to date, I even got some information recently, up to date, some people have never completed their PhDs because in the first place, they didn't want to go, even when the funding was available. Professor Antai, am I still audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you very much. I will share this the slides. Now, I wanted us to focus on building a mountain of knowledge. The core foundation of a PhD is, generating new knowledge. And the journey, most of you know, from the topic, problem identification, you run through objectives, you undertake research questions, you do your theoretical considerations, you now look at ethical considerations, and I want to just talk about that, the ethical considerations. In the past, this was not a big deal, actually, except in the developed countries where slowly but surely there was this concept of what is the risk of undertaking certain research, especially in the health sciences. And these days as well, good graduate schools insist that there's a ethical clearance, before somebody undertakes research, because the reason why this is now very critical, by the way, there is mass production of PhDs. Of course, the African continent is much slower, and PhD is a license out there. Go into the world. You have capacity to recreate, your own capacity. In other words, you've been given a license to go and nurture, go and supervise, go and issue, permission to other scholars to come after you. So if you have ethical issues, then even beyond academia, and we know that there are quite a number of people who have academic dishonesty, and if they are at that level, now you can imagine if they go out in the community, they link with industry, they are involved in cutting-edge research, working for different companies beyond, non-academic institutions. This would be a big issue. So then the context as well, where and when, and why you undertake such a PhD, the issues of methodology, the way you compile your findings and you do your discussions. And then finally, you also can't leave us without telling us the gaps that you think that we were limited about, and what further research can actually be done out of your PhD. So now you have attained your PhD, you have done a defense, and we are not talking about the whole process. We now ask the question, beyond, what do you do with your PhD? Of course, the first gate is to be absorbed in an educational institution. And I think the framers of the topic did not want us to spend a lot of time there, because that's really the obvious. The first immediate thing, and which we really undermine in this country, in Uganda and the East African region, is of thinking about the postdoctoral fellowships. I want to inform you that at Kampala International University, we have designed a very good program. We have even publicized it, of attracting postdoctoral fellows. Now, this postdoctoral is very good, especially in the immediate years. You shouldn't stay long without, thinking about postdoctoral fellowships. And what is it about? Basically, it's postdoctoral. It's beyond your PhD. You may have an opportunity to attend to some of the things that you are unable to conclude in your PhD, or some new issues that have sprung out of your PhD, and you are able to access some funding. But most importantly, you work with a more senior colleague and you can actually pair who gives you that opportunity to grow, to learn from them. And I think this is one track where we should be thinking about. Then, of course, the first one is about joining higher education. Then the second one, of course, is the postdoctoral fellowships. Now, the third, I think, is the industry bit. Now, I visited the Netherlands and also Belgium. I've been to Germany, and quite recent, before the lockdown, actually, 2019, I had very extensive visits. And you'll be very, very surprised, for example, that a university like TU Delft produces 1,200 PhDs, 1,200 PhDs in a year. And I was intrigued. I visited, I interacted with the people who are in charge of the postgraduate, the PhD program there. And what they are doing is amazing. It's really basically an engineering technology university. They do not have medicine. They don't teach medicine. They don't train any graduate in medicine. And what they do, they get PhDs who come and do research and innovations in other fields that they do not have. And health sciences is one of them. So they partner, for example, with Leiden University, also in the Netherlands, where Leiden has a medical center. For them, the medical school and related teaching hospital are normally called medical centers, even Amsterdam and so on and so forth. So what they do, they undertake PhD research where there are innovations that are practical and are usable and are relevant in the medical field. So a student will have undertaken a bachelor's of science in engineering. It could be electrical, it could be mechanical. Now, if it's mechanical, for example, and his interest or her interest would be focused on biomedical engineering. And so at PhD level, they are looking at cutting-edge research that would result in production, let's say, of probes that are used in surgery. So the curriculum of the PhD is in such a way that it's only focused on the research area. So this industry research I'm talking about, which is a route, a pathway beyond academia. Now, who funds this type of research? You'll find the companies that are interested in, for example, Philips, that produces medical equipment, will develop interest in producing a probe that will be used, let us say, in a laparoscopic surgery. And then this PhD student with an engineering background will be assisted by the graduate school to undertake certain medical courses only focused on the area that will help this student to understand and contextualize the research he or she is going to do. And so they will be required to go to Leiden University, which is a collaborating institution, to undertake, let's say, courses in basic anatomy, basic physiology, you can mention any other thing, so that when he or she is trying now to design a probe that will be used for non-invasive surgery, without operation, he or she will understand the entire biology, the physiology of the body, so that this probe can actually go in without damaging the cells. They will understand that, the application of such equipment will be possible. Now, Philips, the funding agency for this research, injects money at TU Delft, injects money, pays also the tuition for these students at Leiden through TU Delft. And then this student undertakes research and focuses on basically that. And the papers that are undertaken that are related to medicine are not necessarily, it's not even a requirement to pass those papers, but to understand the application of those papers. So this is where the point of diversion between the focus of PhD that is driven, that drives innovation in industry. And you can imagine this particular student who attains his PhD is not actually interested so much in going to teach. His job is to make sure that he does the next version of the probe that is being developed. I hope you understand, the way the PhD here is working. Another route would be publication support. There are quite a number of PhD graduates who really become extremely good in publishing. They write articles. They are very good in communicating their scientific research. This is an area. This is a possibility of PhDs who can actually develop publication support. We know there are hundreds of high index journals, good publication houses, and they really want people who are highly academic, who may be able to support the quality. And you see the people who do the peer reviews, these are really extreme high-end PhD holders, extreme, forget about the ones who do the copy editing in the publication. I'm talking about critiquing the academic output for global utilization. And then we have something that is developing really quite quickly. This is what they call science journalism and social outreach journalism, where now science is being communicated in a way that is beyond just academic training. And in this case, we appreciate that we could have, and there are quite a number of countries that have produced many of the PhDs that are in this particular field. I'm sure you know what we call Creative Commons. There is a big wave now, and recently I was in Europe at the European Commission. The wave is that the Creative Commons, where we have repositories that allow access to information, access to knowledge that has been developed, and also increasing equity, especially in the developing countries. This is also an area where human resource is needed to do editing, to ensure that what is reposited for free access has also to match the minimum standards of the academic rigor that is required. And so that's an opportunity also for the PhDs. Now, where do we want to go next? The factors and decisions about beyond academia, these are guided by, financial aspirations. We all want to have a good life. We all want to earn something nice. We also want to be challenged. I told you earlier that depending on the reasons why one undertakes a PhD, I think the financial issues are very critical. And this is very important for us, especially in the Ugandan context and the East African region. There is no way you can retain your very best PhDs without attending to that. I can guarantee it will only be temporary. Somebody good will only be temporary with you. If you do not attend to that, you can be sure they will actually find other opportunities. I've already given you, there are so many agencies now, especially in the Western world, that are looking for brilliant people who can think. There are so many science parks, innovation parks and people are looking for a good life. You know, they have things to do, they have aspirations. Number two, I think it's important also for us to think about a good working team. It's not enough to have a PhD, but it's very, very rewarding to have networks. Ask yourself, since you attend your PhD, for those who hold it now, which PhD network, which collegial networks are you in? And I really want to thank members who thought about this Socratic network, where we can think. I know Ahmed Warugembe is also working on another new network. I think this is very important for us because then we are able to answer a few questions, how relevant our PhDs are to society. And then there are people who actually decide to go beyond academia because of the flexibility that it offers. I mean, the non-flexible institutions make life very difficult. And so people easily drop out and find where they think they will have room and space to exercise their newly acquired, you know, that knowledge creation capacity, if we may call it. As I try to wind up, we should understand, ladies and gentlemen, that a PhD empowers graduate students or postgraduates to expand their career options beyond the traditional academic track. Unfortunately, for our case, many of the people who undertake PhDs are looking towards working within the academic institutions. We can have collaborations between industry and the academic institutions. Number two, we should be thinking about knowledge production. When you attain your PhD, you have produced new knowledge. But now the fundamental question is, how have you applied it? And how is it transferable for use by other stakeholders? And how important is it going to be? Number three, we should do, as universities and other higher education institutions, we should be able to enhance national capacity for PhDs, for a more sustainable development, not production of PhDs per se. Last but not least, sub-Saharan African countries that lag behind at the moment need to increase the production rate of PhDs, and substantial investments need to be done. I have already told you, for example, at an institutional level, the 29 PhD programs include the most recent ones: PhD in medicine, PhD in public health, PhD in statistics, PhD in economics, and so on and so forth. Now, who is going to fund? The students may be able to pay their tuition, but when it comes to research, I think at national level, there has to be some kind of deliberate effort created to inject money, first of all, to develop the capacity of universities, and then prepare others to join beyond the education institutions, but working collaboratively. We must not jeopardize the quality under the guise of rapid expansion. So I think this is so important that we must keep away from compromising the quality of the PhD programs under the guise of, you know, we have to produce many more. I think each PhD requires the rigor that is internationally acceptable. We also have to strike a balance between you know, increasing the numbers and also diffusion of doctoral programs. I mean, how can we have this multidisciplinarity, the integration? For example, our colleagues at MOOBS, is it possible for us, MOOBS and KIU, I'm just giving an example, to think about a multidisciplinary PhD that is not going to be that laborious, but that is relevant in addressing the needs. Combining, let's say we do a PhD in medicine that addresses the entrepreneurial skills that are needed by this new PhD in driving, creating new knowledge, in addressing the health status, putting business sense in medicine through a PhD program. I think this is something I'm proposing. We should have strong linkages between universities. I don't know, I think some of you have actually done split programs. You study here in Makerere, and then you go and cover a certain component, you have joint supervision, and then some of the PhDs are even jointly awarded globally now. This is going to bring in a lot of synergy, but also exposure. Like I've told you, if I have my PhD students of engineering, right, at KIU we have PhDs in engineering, mechanical, civil, electrical, and so on, and I attach them to the TU Delft, and then they learn, they look at the intensity, intensity and the rigor in the PhD at TU Delft. I mean, we can graduate as many as we think we can, but they can't match. So if there is a big industrial project coming on board, let's say they are going into production of oil now in Hoima and those areas, can our students compete with these students at TU Delft? Both of them are PhD holders. I think this is what I'm talking about. So the linkages will help us to boost what we lack here, and then bring on board new partnerships that are going to bring new staff, new supervision strategies. And then last but not least, there's no doubt that we should continue to look for data that can help us to identify the most critical PhDs we should engage in. This is my last communication now. What are my concerns? My first concern, and I think maybe for some of you there, is the quality of both the doctoral studies and the abilities of the candidates. Do we care about the people we admit for doctoral studies in universities? Is it a matter of applying, submitting a concept paper, identifying supervisors, etc., etc.? Is the student ready for a PhD? If not, okay, do we just not admit them, or do we prepare for them some remedial entry courses? And for our PhDs in research at KI, for example, they are mandatory cross-cutting courses, and these courses must be passed. They don't contribute to the grading, but you must pass them, scientific communication, advanced research methods, and so on. If you can't pass the cross-cutting courses, then maybe you are not destined for a PhD. My second concern, this mountain, building a mountain of knowledge at doctoral level, is it addressing the society problems, or is it just per se? We have so many PhDs. This is my concern. Let's look at ourselves as institutions. At an individual level, we have different reasons. I already explained those. But at the institutional level and the national level, who cares? And this is where I think the funding should come, the carrot and stick. We give you money, you attend to our problem of traffic jams. Can we have a PhD in traffic management? And then we see what type of new knowledge you are bringing on board. We can push you there so that we give you money, we fund you, you produce new knowledge. This knowledge addresses our major nightmare of traffic in the city. Number 3, we have a big shortage, lack of critical mass of experts to supervise the doctoral thesis. Do you know, some colleagues are so unfair to themselves. They undertake supervision of PhDs more than they can swallow. There are national benchmarks, there are international standards, and you find somebody has 8 students under their supervision. How on earth can you attain that in one go? Of course, some may be delaying, but I think it's so important that the quality of supervision determines also the quality of the PhD production, whether with it to work to serve in academia or not. That's a different matter. So how do we build the capacity? And the quick route is really, we should be thinking about postdoctoral fellowships to enhance the PhDs. The minimum requirement is that somebody to supervise should have at least 2 years or postdoctoral. Now, this is something that we can deliberately do, and then provide funding for postdoctoral fellowships, and then we do what we call professional attachments. Let's say Professor Ntai is so good in discipline X, I send them my recent PhD for a fellowship and supervision. They are supervised, they become co-supervisors, and then they co-publish. And in that way, we build the capacity. So otherwise, if we take on more than we can supervise, then you can be sure we shall churn out PhDs that are substandard. Last but not least, we should be thinking about interdisciplinary collaboration and making sure that each of our disciplines are relevant. And this is my take-home message, the last message I'm giving. I've challenged my colleagues in KIU. When you go to the Western campus, you are amazed at this big science and technology hub. You have medicine, you have nursing, you have pharmacy, you have engineering, you have economics, you have education and allied health sciences. Then I ask my question, how can all of you work together, or at least 3 of you work together, so that you appreciate that, you know, these guys who are graduating in medicine are also very important. A student who is doing a master's in medicine in surgery should have interest in mechanical engineering, because the probes and other tools, instruments used in theater are an interest of the engineers. And so doing the intersection, for me, I think, is the way forward. I really want to thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I have used about an hour, and I hand over back to Professor Ntai, and I apologize for the technology hitch, but I will share this presentation immediately we are done. Thank you so much, sir. Over to you, Chair, and I hope I have contributed towards this discussion.
Thank you so much, Professor Mohammed. I think, honestly, I'm blessed to have attended this session, and colleagues, senior colleagues and students, I think all of us can attest that the information we have got this morning will really be able to take us to a higher level. And I must appreciate Professor Joseph Ntai for having linked up with Professor Ahmad. Before we go into the next session, where I know we will want to interact with you, Professor, thank you so much, and colleagues join with me to appreciate Professor for such a wonderful presentation, which has been able to help us to see critical issues which we need to address both as PhD scholars and also students. And I think this really gives us a critical direction which we must be able to move forward. But allow me to recognize the colleagues who logged in, who were not acknowledged before, but also let me just basically acknowledge all the senior colleagues. I want to begin by acknowledging again Professor Joseph Ntai for this. I also want to acknowledge Professor Sam Adaramola from Norway, Professor Laura Orobia, you're welcome. Professor James Kagari, you're welcome. Dr. Paul Edabu, you're welcome. Dr. Goreti Chione, you're welcome. Dr. Gideon Nkuzinza, Dr. Edith Basaliwa, and our very own Dr. Ahmad Walgembe. Of course, I also want to appreciate each and everyone who has logged in this morning, and I believe that the presentation has been able to trigger something in our minds, in our hearts, and I think that should be able to help us drive our discussion. Again, Professor, I must really thank you. I also happened to attend a session, actually National Higher Education in Uganda is trying to come up with a strategic plan to drive education in this country. And most of the stakeholders are acknowledging that the caliber of scholars we are training these days doesn't meet the market needs. Actually, most of the people argue that the jobs are there, but the caliber of the scholars, the caliber of the graduates don't really meet the aspirations. And I think towards the last bit of your present and through actually, you can clearly see that your presentation touches the heart of that. Furthermore, when you look at the strategic, the NDP3 National Development Plan for Uganda, around 17 chapters actually identify critical areas which universities should focus on training, and even areas of collaborations are really identified. So I really believe that to me, on my personal level, really, I believe I've really gained a lot. And I think most of the issues you have highlighted are for all of us as scholars and students, and see really how to shape our direction. So I want to take this opportunity and invite members to raise any comment, to raise any question, and maybe if you want a point of clarification. And I think Professor is with us, and I think let us take this opportunity to gain more insights from Professor. Yes, do you have any question, any comment? I think there is already a comment on the chat room. Yes. Yeah, I think from our very own Professor Joseph Ntai, maybe you can elaborate further on that. Yeah, as other colleagues give, please, senior colleagues and students, this is an opportunity for you students who really have a direction. I think Professor can really be able to help us to shape our direction, and even as senior colleagues. I welcome any comment.
Okay, as we wait for any comments, I think Professor Ntai says, thanks, Professor Mpeza, for the eye-opening presentation on the PhD beyond academia. Thank you for bringing out the following realities. The mismatch between PhD training, job, and time is real. And then skills related to work and PhD experience and received value of the PhD and time. I think what I can say, and thanks a lot, Professor Ntai, I think what I can say, the first comment about the mismatch, this is a reality. It seems we are producing, you know, I think it will not be fair to say in a haphazard way. I think the PhD production is at the moment driven by individuals, and the institutions probably marketing their programs for the sake of it, some of them. But as I've told you, some of the other institutions have got targets to meet. And I think that's really something core that you are bringing. The job, Professor Michael, I think I'm one of the people who tends to disagree seriously on the issue of the capacity of the job. You know, the rate at which the massification rate, the production of higher education graduates is higher than the jobs that are being created, and that actually is linked to the mismatch which Professor Ntai is talking about. It's like we are not communicating. So whereas it is true, indeed, and as I've already alluded to it, there are some situations where the capacity of the candidates is really, really wanting, and there is nothing that is being done other than admit them and carry on with them until, you know, some people have said, just let this guy go, or this lady. Yeah, he has stayed here for long. You know, I mean, that kind of attitude is definitely going to destroy the quality of our graduates. But at the same time, and I think these 17 areas, the critical areas for us to focus on, nobody is paying attention. The universities don't even have the resources to go and pull out those national focus areas. And also the state should deliberately inject money. By the way, I want to recognize, I don't know whether this is a similar name, but I want to recognize Madame Elizabeth Gabona. I don't know whether she's the one I saw, a participant. She's contributed immensely in higher education, but maybe it's a similar name. But the higher education subsector must work, you know, in tandem with the national focus. So the mismatch is still a big issue, and that is why we are faced with a challenge. You are producing PhDs, but you are also lacking people to supervise them, and this is a big problem. Skills related to work. Again, I think in the beginning we should produce people who are multi-skilled, and then we can specialize. Again, I am I really am a champion of that, it's better you produce somebody who is next to all round, but of course the danger is you may know a little of everything, and therefore you know nothing. There's that risk. And the perceived value of the PhD and time. I think these are critical points from Professor Ntai. Over to you, Professor Michael, please. I wanted just to highlight my opinions on what Ntai posted in the chat.
Thank you so much, Professor Muhammad. I don't know, colleagues, I beg that we raise some comments, we highlight areas, because Professor has really highlighted critical issues on PhD journey. I see again there's, I see Dr. Dabu has asked the question that most scholarship on postdoc is limited to 3 years. Why?
Actually, Dr. Dabu, you may wish to unfortunately know that 3 years will actually even be too long. Most of the postdocs actually last 1 year. Others go up to a maximum of 2 years. So if 3 years is too short for you, then that becomes another PhD actually. So a postdoc is highly focused, and as I have said, it is actually postdoctoral in a way that it's like a semi-continuation of the work that you embarked on, but then you catch up with it, within at least 3 years. I think you shouldn't exceed 4 years if you want to go for your postdoctoral, because as you know, knowledge production is very dynamic. And so it's in your interest to undertake postdoctoral, and they are very, very highly valuable, by the way. You realize you need a postdoctoral training and fellowship only when you are in it, because then it takes you to another level and prepares you to undertake, if you are to remain in academia, to undertake big responsibilities, to try and mentor others. But if you go into industry, it creates for you opportunities in your area of study where you may focus, you may even attract funding. And there are business companies out there that are interested in investing in innovation. And so you may be lucky enough that through your postdoctoral publication or discovery, additional discovery, you are able to be supported. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. Any other comment?
Yeah, Prof, this is Sam Adramola. Please share, can you permit me to speak a few words?
I think the chair has allowed you.
Yes.
So thank you, Professor Mohammed, for the nice speech. I really appreciated it. And sometimes it's good to go beyond our science knowledge. It's good to have it in a broader way. And I'm from Norway, so I can also share some things a little bit, especially when it comes to interaction between the university and industry, even public service. In Norway, there's what we call public service supported PhD. So, for example, if there's somebody working in ERA or working in any government agency in Uganda, and they have some of their staff that are, they want to study PhD, or they also have some specific problem they want to solve. So instead of giving this contract to outsiders to do for them, they sponsor the student for PhD maybe for 3 years. So that at least the student, by the time he finish, he have the PhD and he can actually relate to the problem they have. And since, like you mentioned, that some people do the job, they do PhD because of money. So they still keep their job and they still acquire the knowledge. So they do that a lot. And they also do some company to also apply to National Research Council in Norway. They have an idea of a project. They want to check if the knowledge is valuable, is useful. then they can combine funding. The government will give about 50% and the company will give about 50%, and they will send this particular employee of themselves to this particular university to study. So by study, student is coming out like it's producing knowledge that's actually useful for this particular company. It's not just knowledge that you throw under the table, but it's something that can directly be used. And I talked to some of colleagues in Uganda recently, and I know some of them in public services, they want to do PhD, but they can't abandon their job, they can't abandon the system, and they also have to look for money to pay the tuition fees. So this kind of public, government, private with the university could actually help. Briefly on the issue of postdoc, like you said, postdoc should not be long time. It's supposed to be maybe 2 to 3 years at most. And in most cases, the purpose of postdoc is to now create a person of independence, because as a PhD student, you depend on your supervisor for almost everything, advice. But in between, the moment you get, then you become more of yourself. That is when I always advise my students, the first thing you need to do when you finish your PhD, try to write, try to do some research without your supervisor input, and see how far you can go with that kind of activities. So that give you more independent, and that also allow you to explore your inner mind or inner desire, because now, even though you might still collaborate with professors, but the professor will not treat you like a PhD. They treat you, they see you as a colleague. Actually, in my university here, the moment you finish your PhD, you can actually be attached to a professor to start supervising PhD and to start supervising master students. So we actually use them. They are almost like the senior. It's when everything breaks down that you bring them to the professors to start looking at. But most of the students, by the time they get to the postdoc level, most of the problem already been solved. So normally it's not, if it is more than 2-3 years, like you said, it becomes another study, and you don't want to do another PhD study after your PhD. So I think if we can find a way where the government agencies, the public agencies, and the industry, which is common in most African countries, we rather take our problem abroad to solve. But we also, I'm from Nigeria, I stay in Europe, and I know that sometimes when we travel abroad, you eventually you come to Norway to talk to Norwegian, but the Norwegian you are talking to is originally from Uganda, and he did almost every degree in Uganda, probably a PhD or maybe work experience in Norway. But then I say you are running to Uganda. So what I'm saying is that some of our company can also develop our capacity. They can assist. Either they put money into the government post, or they actually contribute directly and sponsor some of their staff for PhD. I think that would be where we stop at this level. But Prof, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you so much, Prof. Sam. Let me give also a chance to Elizabeth Gabona and then DVCFA. And then we shall, Professor will respond to those comments, and then we can again take a couple of more together with the one which has been posted on the chat. Yes, Elizabeth.
Professor, thank you for the excellent presentation. It is the same Elizabeth, seeking for more knowledge.
I'm glad to hear your voice, ma'am.
Yeah, you talked about the reasons why people do PhD. Yeah, I'll use another opportunity to say to you why a PhD, why now? But areas you have touched in your presentation are very, very critical. Networks between institutions, we could do a lot more. Networks among students themselves. Each institution has great potential, but I think we don't talk to each other enough. I salute efforts of the inter-university Council of East Africa, you know how much effort, how much has been achieved there. But within our nation, are we doing enough to talk to each other? Are we doing enough to look at the national aspirations or needs? You talked of the development plan. And there's a gap there. The areas which the country wants to develop, the research we are doing, and where can this influence the funding? I think I don't have to say the issue of funding is a big hitch, and we need to investigate how we can better fund, how we can better attract the funding for individuals, for institutions, how we can share information about the available opportunities in agencies and so on. Thank you very much, Prof. I also want to congratulate you for your contribution to higher education up to now. And thank you, Professor Tai, and all the other facilitators. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Professor Pincho.
Thank you very much. I would like first and foremost to thank Professor Michael for organizing us in this morning's session. And I would like to thank also Professor Muhammad for giving us brilliant ideas about a PhD beyond the academics. And I would like to say hello to Professor Tai and Gabona Elizabeth, who has contributed very immensely in the education system in this country. I'm very glad to have again met you on this platform. This gives me very great joy, Elizabeth. Now, coming to the point of a PhD beyond academia, colleagues, you realize that oftentimes you hear the saying, PhD is a degree for teaching. PhD is a degree for teaching. Yes, indeed it is. But I think there's something which we need to do to what we currently do if we have to see PhD beyond the academics. For instance, I will give an example of you producing PhD in management. Now, the understanding of that would be within the context of PhD is a teaching degree, is that one is able to lecture, one should be in the university, one should be able to impart knowledge, but the question is, what kind of knowledge are we imparting, even if we have the PhD, even if you're producing other PhDs? I think that's where I see that there's a bit of challenge. It is inadequate, in my opinion, that after obtaining my PhD, then I'm there in the class, in that good university, lecturing and making people know the theory of motivation, making people know how to delegate, making people know this and that in management. How are we able to go beyond remaining in the class and making my students understand delegation, understand theories of motivation, understand the different aspects of management? I will give an example. Yesterday, I was lecturing a class of master's students in educational planning and management here at Muni University. And, I was telling them and giving them a work to do. Now, procurement, knowing about it, that a lot of institutional funds is expended through procurement, this is how procurement processes take place. This is the circle. By far is inadequate. And I was telling them, I'm going to give you a project. I began with the sharing experiences. And a number of them are head teachers in the secondary schools, and others are aspiring for that, and so forth. But it's amazing to find out that almost no procurement procedures are followed in their procurement processes in the different secondary schools in which they are rendering their services, either as teachers or even as head teachers of those institutions. And so I would like you to go and put in place a procurement system. Go and meet your chief administrative officer. Go and meet your head of procurement in the district and discuss what it takes to set a procurement, to put in place a procurement system in your school, and write a report on how you have seen that your school has now embraced procuring whatever goods, services, or works in accordance with what is required of them. Now, this makes a very big difference between teaching the theory of procurement and then administering examinations and then say, okay, they have passed and they've gone out and then now they are school managers, when actually in the school in which they are, you have taught them procurement, but nothing is being followed. It is not in place, but they know only about it. I think we need to change our approach to it. That is what I look at as a PhD beyond the academia. Making the knowledge to become a functional knowledge, the knowledge that you are giving in the university to reach out there on the ground and be put to practical use is what I understand by PhD beyond academia. I find this challenging. I myself have attended a number of been a student several times and in many universities and institutions, but the theoretical aspect of approach by which these disciplines are taught, I think is a challenge, and we need to go more of the project, making things happen than simply knowing about the things that we are learning that is making us become PhD holders. This is when I can see that we are able to transform society using the PhD knowledge we have attained. And that's when I can see that the PhD is beyond academia. Thank you very much, colleagues.
Thank you so much, Professor Pincho. I think our presenter, you take on those ones, then as we shall be able to take on more. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, really. I want to thank every contributor. If I may start with our senior colleague, Professor Sam Adaramola. Nice to see you, sir, and I hope you are doing a great job there in Norway. I think one comment that you raised, which is really emanating also from what I said, and which links up with Mama Gabona's submission. There you have a deliberate focus on the reason for a PhD. You know, it is direct funding, but for a purpose. And I think this is what we need to do deliberately. For example, for our National Development Plan, we already have identified the areas for critical development, for critical investment. So that needs a government, it needs a, you know, like a framework that will help us to link our budgeting process to also identifying institutions that can shoulder that responsibility to address specific problems of society. And I think that affirmative action makes a huge difference between developing countries and what you call developed or first world countries, whatever that means. But I think in this context, I mean the countries that go for it and they address that problem. And I think at the Ugandan level, the government of Uganda, we should also appreciate, for example, the establishment of the Ministry of Science and Technology, investment into innovation. There is something that is coming up, but I think, and I always talk, and Madame Gabona, I served with her for like 10 years in the National Council for Higher Education, where I was a member, and I chaired several committees. I've always talked about level ground between private and public providers of higher education. And in Norway, the example of Norway is it doesn't matter. I think if it's a problem, a national problem, a localized problem, local government problem, a district problem, it doesn't matter if the best researcher comes from a private institution or a public institution. What we want is, can this person actually undertake research, produce new knowledge that can be effective in attending to that problem. And I also want to agree, of course, postdoctoral is that's why I was saying you are nurtured, you get, you move beyond the PhD and also develop this independence. This is a very good thing. So the take home from Professor Sam's suggestion is, what can we do? How can we influence government and also private institutions and industry? I wanted to suggest recently in the National Council for Higher Education conference that is it possible for us to levy a certain tax, a certain contribution, let's not call it a tax really, a contribution from industry towards PhD production, and those PhDs focusing on needs of the country. I think this is the way to go. This is what I think. Professor Antai, I thank you so much. You really put a lot of information in the chat room, and I have looked at them. I mean, there are issues of return on investment, and you are right. Industry are a bit apprehensive, and this is the whole issue of making ourselves understood. By the way, the communication that is being talked about, the industry is busy producing certain goods and services. We are busy producing graduates. We do not have forums or networks that can bring us together. I think the National Council tried. They have got a representative from the Uganda Manufacturers Association, the Uganda Chamber of Commerce, but it stops at a certain level. There isn't an effort, let's say, from a University X to try and say, let me go to Mukwano Industries and understand their business model, their philosophy, them understanding us, and then influencing the curriculum of my business program, business administration program, or procurement, whatever it is. So there is some need. I don't know whether it should be done through the Vice Chancellor's Forum, or we should have some networks that can actually initiate this. It is, I think, food for thought. And so convincing Mukwano Industries, for example, Mukwano Industries, Professor Sam is one of those big industries that has more than 16 products. Convincing them to spend $30,000 to produce a PhD must be justifiable. So, and they will ask the question, why should we invest 30,000 instead of improving maybe one of our factory lines or importing new technology? Why would we spend it on an individual who is not going to add value? So these are questions that need to be answered. We have to have that dialogue. Mama Gabona, excellent suggestions, and you have always said it. We do not talk enough to one another. I have got a concept as a person, and I have presented different fora. And if this network thinks I can also share those ideas, there is a concept I am promoting called we would rather have reverse linkages than competition. By reverse linkages is that I identify Professor Sam, he's in Norway, Professor Antai is at MOBS, and another professor at KIU. I look at the capacity in Norway that I don't have, and Norway also looks at the capacity that I have that they may not have, and we synergize. I think this is really that this is what is going to bring us to fruition in terms of PhD development and also postdoctoral development, and also ensuring that this knowledge creation is impactful. And so I fully agree that if we do this and we exclude the whole idea of competing, I have no reason to compete with MOOCs. I have no reason to compete with the Makerere. Even when I go to IU, where I served for so long, there's no reason they should not look at me with suspicion. And I think the moment we break these barriers, the concept of reverse linkages is going to help us a lot. I mean, sometimes PhD students approach the institution and they want just to help them fill a questionnaire, and we are all suspicious. You know, they go to the college says you go to this one, then you have to, until the matter reaches the Vice Chancellor's office, and then you ask yourself, why? What is wrong with you sharing this information? They want to know, for example, how you are. This PhD is focused on innovations in universities. So give them information. If you have any challenges, share so that that can contribute to it. But we are all the time suspicious, and I think we need to grow to outlive this and move on. Professor Pincho, I think you're from MUNI, first of all. Your fallen colleague, our foreign friend, Professor Dwanzoa, was our chair of the Inter-University Council for East Africa. I've been a member of the executive committee. We really condole you, and we hope you will be able to get to the feet again and move very well. I fully agree with you about you know, the need for linking theory to practice. I think this was your major point. Unfortunately, what is happening, forget about the PhD, even at undergraduate level, we expect to bridge the gap between theory and practice through internships and placements. What is happening at the moment is that even for internships, you will find for the undergraduates, they are spending more time serving tea, you know, handling front desks, and you know, delivering letters. And I mean, this is a student you have sent to understand how, you know, financial transactions happen at the till in a bank. And because of confidentiality issues, because of all sorts of things that are not helping us at all, these students don't get anything. Now, in terms of the theory and practice, I'm not sure whether these students of yours were even successful in understanding the procurement, because then they would be seen as people from State House anti-corruption team or something like that. So we have a lot of barriers to break, to, you know, and build bridges in terms of adding value to the theory. And I agree. I mean, I visited the One Kenya financial institution, and because of this barrier of the failure to actually impart, to bridge the gap, to impart the practical skills to their financial training, they actually put up simulation units within the university. For example, they created bank tills, so the students model around that. I also visited MIT, and I saw how they train students in managing stock exchange. I mean, they will not allow you, the ones who are in it will not allow you to go in depth because there's a lot of business secrecy. So how innovative can we be to actually ensure there's functional knowledge attained rather than theoretical, people who are just recalling, you know, and answering and getting first class, and yet there's a huge gap in the practical aspects. Chairperson, if you allow me, there are a few comments in the chat room, and I want to thank all the members. I've already talked about the issues from Professor Antai. Professor Paul Edabo has also said that most institutions worldwide offer both taught and research PhD only. What is your take on both PhDs in terms of generating new knowledge in university? Secondly, do we have universities in Uganda offering postdoctoral? I think if you read the guidelines, really, any PhD must create new knowledge. There's no question about that. It doesn't matter whether it is taught and research. Research is a minimum anyway, but the taught bit is helpful, especially for those who would like to go into the track of academia. enhancing their knowledge. There are also people who undertake PhDs when they have gaps in their master's programs, the degrees they attained. And so in order for them to be fully grounded, they are required to do those taught courses, the course. But I am also not a favorable supporter of too many courses, and this is the reason again why do you congest the taught section of the PhD? There are so many, they are not irrelevancies, but we waste a lot of time, and I think we should be highly focused when we come to that level, because we are targeting to produce new knowledge. Postdocs, maybe Professor Antai knows, I don't know, I think maybe in Makerere there are some. I've already said in KIU we are launching some as well, and so I don't know about the other institutions. Then Mr. Juma, maybe this is Dr. Juma Teko. I am just guessing anyway, but there are too many coincidences in the J and T. Issues among others, there's still lack of collaboration amongst academia, institutions. That's very true. Practical exposure and implementation platforms of most of the doctoral. Now, I think this is what I'm talking about. The exposure, the practical exposure, if the physical is getting us into trouble, and you saw COVID-19 presented a challenge, is it possible for us to invest in simulations, in software that can help us to appreciate before we even get into the field? I think this is where we have, of course, there are issues of money. There are companies at the moment that have taken advantage, but they require you to pay, let's say, $100 per year, license fees per student. And this is going really to exclude so many of the students. So I would propose that at institutional level, there are negotiations that can help to get licenses that are open. And as I've said, there are creative commons. And in the European Commission, there is a full department that is looking at capacity development and also the issue of open science, where they want to encourage scholarship into the Creative Commons and also funding. In fact, they are targeting Africa, Europe-Africa collaboration. So it's an opportunity for us to try and do that. Limitations from institutions like World Bank, IMF that channel resources to only areas realizing the institutional goals. Of course, this is what I was saying. We have sometimes the one who pays the piper is the one, it determines whatever. I think you know that saying. Failure to design suitable doctoral topics that relate to the different countries. For example, sub-Saharan countries showing much interest in topics that suit the Western world. This is the mismatch that has already been talked about. We should be in charge of the PhD development program and postdoctoral. As I said, if you recall, if you attended my first part of the presentation, there are different reasons why people undertake PhDs. Sometimes there's money. So they just call you and say, you just enroll. Sometimes you want to go for high-tech research and so on. So if the World Bank, the IMF come, sometimes they condition you, they say, okay, we have an issue. You must come to Sweden and you must research into, okay, let's go to Netherlands and say we want to do more on the issues of reclaiming more land. You know, Netherlands is really reclaimed from the sea. So I mean, here in Uganda, you even don't have a sea. You only have lakes and rivers. But then you do a PhD in reclaiming land. You learn the principles. You appreciate them. When you come here, you ask yourselves, what are you going to do? So these are some of the issues sometimes that affect us in terms of choosing the priorities. David Kimoimo, I have been in consultancy for 25 years and been addressed as doctor. I'm doing my PhD to be able to answer in the affirmative. How can the PhD leverage the consultant pathway? Sir, David, I want to give you good news. There is a new concept. It's not really very new. There's what they call the professor of practice title now. We invite, I mean, institutions, universities should invite you to come and talk your extensive consultancy experience. You bridge the gap, as Professor Pincho was talking about, by bringing practice closer to the students. And then leveraging this consultancy pathway. I think consultancy is one item I left out, and I think you are right, sir. I am going to add it in my notes. But congratulations that you are going there already. You are being called doctor. Others will even call you professor. But I think it's good that you are taking up the task. You will probably be a better PhD holder, and maybe you'll be able to tell us why you are going for the PhD. Is it to confirm the title, or you want to actually grow and become more technical, more professional in terms of creating new knowledge? So that is the answer to you. Kindly advise on how universities can turn a PhD into a non-academic career. I think we have alluded to that. And basically, I think the route is to work with industry, to work with communities, and also application of the knowledge that you have created, I think. But we need facilitation. As Mama Gabona said, funding is of great importance, but targeted funding, deliberate funding to achieve deliberate objectives. I think for me, that is where we are going wrong in our African setting. We shouldn't really gamble with the outcomes. We must define the outcomes and invest exactly in activities and work and tasks that can deliver us to our targeted objectives. This is the best way to optimize our resources. Gideon Luvale, Ronald, thanks for the presentation. I suggest we coin a strategy through National Council to tap in the private-public collaboration for PhDs to make contribution to practice. Thank you very much. This we have already proposed, and that is why I'm saying we should go into for MOUs. We should do joint PhDs, joint supervision, and I think it has been done before, but with universities outside Uganda, I think, but also in here, inside, in-house. I think, for example, with Sitema and MUST have done some joint PhDs. Makerere has also done with MUST. We should also have many more coming on board, private, public, to support that. Dr. Ahmad Walugembe, thank you very much, Prof, for your contribution. I support the idea of business community contribution to research. This is extremely relevant and may support more innovations in the country. Excellent. This I don't have any problem. We should create centers of innovation and entrepreneurship in universities. There is no way, Mama Gabona said we are not talking. We should create spaces, where we allow industry to come and camp at the university, interact with us. They should also provide for us a coordination office, and interact and appreciate what goes on. I think we have to move it up to that level. Professor James Kagari, I think you didn't put in your point, but I thank you. Makerere University hosts postdoctoral fellowship programs. Thank you. That's information. And then Kadu Juma, thanks for the discussion. I appreciate. Yes, Professor Kagari, thank you for the presentation. Being multidisciplinary at PhD is healthy, but being assessed for promotion at universities is problematic because of failure to establish area of specialization. So the common question is, where is your home? In fact, it's very wrong. You should take on a multidisciplinary PhD holder as long as the background actually has helped to build that PhD. Most often, we don't look at the background. I think, and asking our applicants, why have you come for this PhD? Somebody may write an excellent concept, and you think this is the best candidate. But actually, their motives for the PhD is different. Their background is different, and they may not even deliver to your expectations. So I would really promote this. I know Professor Kasozi, the former executive director of National Council, had ideas of having a blend between science and humanities PhD. Of course, one of the demerits of it was going to be too long. You had to do a lot of harmonization and so on and so forth. But I think all we have to do, depending on our capacities, the capacities of the students, the supervision capacity, our institutional goals and the national goals, we should be able, each one of us, to take a role, but produce PhDs that first of all will help us. Don't forget, universities are the breeding ground. So we need to first of all enhance capacity within our institutions, and then also produce for this other, the open space that I've talked about, our connection with industry. Last, Mr. Chairman, I know that we are almost closing. Last but not least, we have to think about our individual roles, in ensuring that what we do is truthful, is ethical, and also it adds value to you. I mean, you go through, can I call it academic torture and emotional stress, you attain your PhD. Now, sometimes you also want others to go through the same nightmare. Please, I appeal to whoever is a supervisor. If you suffered so much, do not pass that suffering to others. Be the best supervisor, and that will also help them to become good to the others. Thank you very much, Professor Michael.
Thank you so much, Professor Mpesa. I think all of us can really attest that this has been a morning well spent. Sometimes it's really, it has been wonderful. And having been somebody who wakes up every morning, I think this is one of the very, very good sessions. And what comes clear in my mind is that we need more sessions like this. And I think even if we brought somebody from industry and we discuss together, I think we might find a common ground and see how best to advance, really provide relevant PhDs. But before we conclude, I really want to acknowledge we have been joined by some of our senior colleagues, and I see we have Dr. Hassan Bashir. Dr. Hassan Bashir, you're welcome. Dr. Susan Watundu, you're welcome, and Dr. Sada Shimuli, you're welcome. And I saw also Professor Sam again was raising up his hand. I think Professor Sam, you can come back and really, this is a very nice discussion, honestly. Colleagues, we can't just shut it down. I think let us try to exhaust ideas, but I really believe that together with Dr. Walgembe and Professor Joseph Ntai, we should be able to have again Professor Mpesa come and advance something, extend some area, because really from the discussions alone, you see how we work out collaboration. And I think that's where everybody is trying to give suggestions, and maybe we need to look at maybe we'll advance. But Professor Sam, can you come back and highlight the issues you wanted to say?
Thank you very much, Shia. So actually, I wanted to also share a small experience in line with what Professor Mohammed said. One thing in Norway is that as a PhD student, you can take your courses from anywhere. So that is one of the things. We encourage, if, for example, at my university, and I discovered as a professor in Shambogo University that is better, that we recognize him, that is very good. We send all our students to that particular professor to go and take courses. So we don't have to repeat the same process in my university, for example, at MOOCs. So we also have to find a way, like Prof said, need to work together. Courses should be available within the country. I mean, we have students from Uganda that go abroad and take courses, but yet the same student cannot go to Shambogo, cannot go to Kampala, cannot go to Kia to take courses, and they will be complaining. So we need to use these resources, and we need to be fair with ourselves. We know, I mean, the professors know professors. In Nigeria, we say there's a professor, that's also professors. We know some people are good in some area. Why not just humble yourself and agree that this professor is better than me in this area? My students go to this university, take these courses, and come back with your degree, and we add it to your curriculum in our university. And it's common practice in Norway, and even within the Nordic country, it's a common practice. And now it's even globally. We run PhD in my program, and we only tell our students, you can take your PhD, your coursework in Nigeria, as long as it's at PhD level, and we look at the curriculum. If it fits into what you want, you can do it anywhere. So I think we need to use that because there are a lot of resources within the Kampala, within Uganda that we can actually utilize. And like I said, we just need to humble ourselves. We are not competing with anybody. We are developing capacity, we are developing knowledge, either knowledge that can be used within the university or that can be used outside to benefit the society. And especially the public university that the government is paying the salary. So it doesn't really matter where the students are coming from. They might be coming from Soroti, they can be coming from Bali, but we should be able to humble ourselves. And when we know that our colleague that is better than us, let's encourage our students to attend that kind of program or courses wherever they are. And if we can support them financially, that would be fine. But I agree with you, Prof. It's not only working with the people abroad, we also need to work within our program. Another thing that Prof you mentioned too, and I also learned from my little experience is that Norwegian will not solve Uganda problem. IMF will not solve Uganda problem. Like somebody said, IMF have a target information, they need certain information, and that is what they will focus on. But it seems that most of us in Africa, we are always happy that we show this is our graduate from Kia. Now is accepted to do master program in London school. They will be so excited. But the question is, can this graduate of ours solve a problem in Kampala? Can they solve a problem in Uganda? The answer is no. So most of us in African university, it's more like we are always happy producing. It's like we are raw materials, sending our good products abroad, and we are happy that our product is accepted abroad. So we need to look at our product. Are they actually solving problems? Norwegians don't care if they are if there's a problem in US or in UK, for example, because the government spend money on the student to solve Norwegian problem. So we need to go back to that level. It's good for our program to be accredited, to be acceptable, to be popular abroad. But the main goal of the education is solving national problem. And that should be our main focus. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Prof, again.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Sam. And I think you have really hit the point. And the little things I've taken this morning, actually, before even I highlight that, I think really you can see that these discussions help us to, even if you look at them as the stakeholders in this platform and you see the ideas which come across. And I think it's because we come from different countries, different universities, that even we're able to sustain a discussion for this length. Because if you are just discussing within your university, you discuss the same issues, same ideas, same everything, but the multiplicity of people from different cultural orientation, different university orientations, really are making sure that this platform, that's why I must thank Professor Joseph Ntai. And I believe that even as universities, we might have to see a way of critically beginning to look at, because I know most universities normally in Africa, we do basic research, basically advancing theory. But when it comes to applied, somebody was telling me from the industry, for us, we're not interested in about your literature reviews. We just want what to use. We're not interested in all those things. We just want what solves the problem. But of course, when you are advising students, if the literature review is not there, what can you? So I think some of these things are the issues. Maybe if we interact with most of the stakeholders, we can be able to see and then be able to make a meaningful contribution. I think it is very clear that we should be closing, and I must thank again our presenter, Professor Mpeza. Thank you so much for this.
Yeah, I also thank you so much for the opportunity. And I want to really recognize one of my mentors, Madam Elizabeth Gabona, who has really, she guided me a lot for many, many years, as I traversed through the higher education subsector. And also Professor Antai, we have worked together on different things. And I want really to say we should open our gates for collaborations. The way to go, I'm sure you know the whole idea now is going it alone will not help anybody. And we should have picked a lesson from the COVID-19 pandemic, where it was very clear that as humanity, we can actually survive if we focus together. And so this is for me the take, sir, and I want to thank everybody. I have actually learned a lot from each one of you, and I'm sure there are quite a number of people who have given compliments. Last but not least, sir, Chairperson, Professor Michael, I have actually shared the presentation in the chat room. I've put it to everybody, but also Professor Antai and Ahmed have got a copy. I hope they will be able to share it with the other members. I thank you so much for the opportunity and have a good morning.
Okay, thank you. Maybe because of time, I would really want to invite Dr. Ahmad Walugeme to make some brief closing remarks, and then Dr. Goretich to close with a word of prayer.
Okay.
Dr. Ahmad, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Am I clear that side, Professor Michael?
Yes, very.
Thank you very much, Professor Michael, for moderating this session. And again, thank you very much, one of our mentors, Professor Mohamed Mpezamigo. Professor Migo has done a great work, especially in working with the youth for a number of activities. Professor, your contribution throughout academia in research is recognized. I think your CV, as earlier mentioned, is very clear. In line, you're working with all these bodies that are governing and managing academia in the country. Being part of the boards here and there is a kind of a great contribution. We appreciate you. I mean, even me contacting you once and say, okay, I'll be available at 4 a.m. It is a sign of humility. Accepting being with us at 4 a.m. is not very common at a person of your level, but we appreciate you and we thank you very much for this, for that contribution. Allow me to thank Professor Antai too, who has been, who is our mentor and somebody behind this platform. As you have seen, the platform puts together students and scholars all over the world. There are many, and these are normal attendees. So you realize that every Sunday we have these discussions from 4 a.m., 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. And people share these experiences. Professor Sam Adramora, thank you very much. Professor Picho from Moni. And Ms. Gabona is a regular attendee, she's always with us. We appreciate her and her contribution to the education system in this country. So with those few remarks, Professor, allow me really thank you very much. We cannot say much from this, but we just get to know that people are appreciative. We shall share your presentation. We know we put a lot of time in preparation and also your time of presentation, but we're grateful for that. And for anything you need from this community, Professor Tai will be available for the support. Thank you, and back to you, our host.
Yes, Dr. Goretti, please close with the word of prayer. Dr. Goretti. Yes, Dr. Goretti. Okay, seems we lost her. Okay. Dr. Goretti, I see. Okay.
She must be having a network challenge.
Let us just pray. Let us pray. Father, in the name of Jesus, one thank you for this morning. One thank you for our presenter. One thank you for all the people who logged in this morning. We pray that you continue guiding us as we lead this platform. And we thank you so much for Professor Joseph Ntai for this initiative. We thank you for all the presenters who have always graced this morning session. And we pray that, Lord, as we continue sharing, we shall be able to support the growth of our communities. We thank you and we pray that this morning you lead us through, and we pray all this through Christ our Lord. Amen. I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All the best.
Waiting for
Bye.